Welcome all. Max of the Accidental Engineer here. Today we are joined by Aaron Zarraga. Aaron is co-founder and CTO of Sensel. Do you mind sharing for our audience a little bit about what Sensel is and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so Sensel is developing basically the future of touch technology. We've developed a very high resolution, full force sensitive touch technology that we're really looking to really want to use it to revolutionize any consumer electronics, any human interface. We want to use it to kind of build the touch screens of the future. So it's full pressure sensitive. It works underwater. It works with any object. It's kind of a very natural way to interact with computers and machines. And so I have a demo that I can show later in the video, so you can get a sense of what we're making. We also have a great product that's on the market right now called the Sensel Morph, and we basically took this new technology that we developed, bundled it up into a really fun product that lets you kind of take advantage of the new technology we built in many different use cases in art, music, gaming, and productivity. So it's kind of an interface that can morph into a bunch of different tools.
Like Aaron said, as we get further in their interview, we'll do a live demo of Sensel's product, and we'll pull out my MacBook and the USB device and plug it in and do a demo. For our audio-only listeners, we'll also be narrating a little bit about what we're doing so you guys can get a sense, but check out the website to see screenshots and whatnot. But for our audience that is used to the format of us asking about our guest's background, do you mind sharing a little bit about how you got to co-founding a business a few years back?
Yeah, so I went to school at Stanford, studied electrical engineering there, did a BS and MS degree there, and then after school started working at Amazon. Worked in Cupertino in their hardware company, Lab 126. And basically worked on, we were in this really cool group called Concept Engineering, where we were working on very future-looking products. A lot of the new product concepts that came out from Amazon were actually kind of first developed in that group. And so, I really enjoyed that team, and it was really fun kind of first out of school experience. While I was working there, I met a few other people, and one of them turned out to be my current co-founder, Ilya Rosenberg. So I met him while I was part of that team, and we had kind of, we had been doing a lot of work in the input space and human machine interaction in that group, and Ilya basically left that team back in 2013 and started kind of thinking about how to build a new touch technology of the future. And basically, he spent some time in his garage making some really interesting new concepts for how to build a touch sensor. And then he, came and found me, or he contacted me one day. And then I went over to his house and saw what he'd kind of put together. And I just saw, I knew that, with him and he and I both working on it, we could make it something really, really special. And I knew that it could have the ability to kind of transform interfaces. And so that's why, for me, that's when I decided to kind of join him, and we started Sensel in December 2013. So that's kind of the rough, high-level intro there. Yeah.
For a lot of our audience and for a lot of our guests too, many don't have a formal education in engineering of any form, whether mechanical, computer science, what have you. How critical was your bachelor's and master's degrees towards preparing you for that first job at Amazon, and then now ultimately for preparing you for co-founding a business?
Yeah. I think the degree for me, so I was electrical, right? Electrical engineering is one of those it's one of those skills that's really hard to learn on your own. I've met a lot of really talented programmers that you can kind of self-teach yourself computer science. But I wanted to do electrical engineering, and for electrical engineering, you can't go out and easily get really all the equipment that you need to do electrical engineering is really expensive. So you can't just kind of do that on your own. And so that's why it's really important for me to do that at school, because they have the labs and they have all the classes where you can go and you can start using their equipment to build stuff. You learn how to use all the test equipment. I think it was really important just for to get me in the gear of how to build things and how to really engineer stuff. So I think it was really important. And in terms of like running a business, right? Electrical engineering degree doesn't teach you a whole lot about how to run a company.
For sure.
But I think it teaches you. For me, school is more about teaching you how to learn and teaching you how to pick up new things. And so I've used that to kind of learn of what it takes to run a company, what it takes to go raise money, hire employees. All that stuff is kind of brand new. And I think when you're doing a startup, no matter what kind of background you have, you're going to be drinking from the fire hose the whole time. So I don't think you can prepare by taking classes in it and stuff. I took an EE for business class, but nothing really prepares you for the stuff that you're going to learn on the job doing a startup.
I know you've given back some to people by mentoring. I think it's undergrads, is that correct? Who are interested in doing similar to what you've done?
Yeah, so Sensel back in 2014 we went through StartX, which is Stanford's startup accelerator program. And so we kind of went through it, and they have this great program where they will kind of teach you. It's kind of like a crash course in like what are the things you need to know to kind of get the startup off the ground. And so we learned how to like raise money, how to like basics of how to do a product launch and things like that. And so I stay heavily involved with StartX. They have a hardware neighborhood, which is part of the program where all the hardware companies get together and talk. And I've run that session a couple times with another team member. So I even though I don't consider myself an expert or anything that can really speak to that yet. I'd like to at some point. But
you're being super modest.
but I've been doing. Sensel just turned 4 in December, just like a week ago. So we've been doing it for 4 years now, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and we've done things the wrong way, and we've done some things the right way. And if there's anything that I can, share with someone who's going through that same journey and help them, like I love doing that, and it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah, people can feel free to get a hold of Aaron. We have a profile page for you where people can submit comments or questions. So if you want to get a hold of Aaron, you can ping him there. One of the things that I'm personally curious about is basically hardware products are a very expensive series of sunk costs to get them to market. Do you mind sharing what those look like from a very high level, not necessarily specific to Sensel, but in contrast to maybe your friends who picked up programming without a formal degree and were able to set up a website or whatever? What are some of the big hurdles of going to market with a hardware product?
So I have an interesting, because my path was starting at Amazon, right? And I was an engineer at Amazon, and we're cranking out hardware products, right? But what's interesting is you only really see the engineering and design side of it, at least when you're a design engineer. So you see the iterations and the prototyping, and you start getting towards production, and that's a lot of work. I think I got a glimpse of what it takes to ship a product from there. What was fascinating is then you go outside of Amazon or whatever big company, and you're doing a startup and you want to do hardware. You realize how much stuff and infrastructure is already done for you at a large company. I remember being at Amazon. I'm a young engineer just out of school, and there's a whole operations team and there's a whole marketing team, and I never interacted with them. Being in an entry kind of level position there, and I always wondered what they did, and you learn very quickly when you're on your own in a startup. You're like, oh, this huge thing that I have to do. That's what the whole operations team was working on. That's what the marketing team was working on. And so, at Amazon, I would just show up and there'd be a factory, and I'd go to the factory and you solve problems, and you go home and you're thinking, wow, that was like really tough. At a startup, there's no factory, right? So you start thinking about, okay, we're gonna build this product, we're gonna do it this way, that way, and you're like, okay, now I got to go find a factory, like I've got to go find a contract manufacturer. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I do that? And you start talking to experts, or, we had a lot of help from consultants that would kind of help fill in the gaps. Mm-hmm. But then you go and you got to negotiate an agreement with the factory, and you've got to do payment terms. And it's in each little bit like that along the way is another huge can of worms that you start opening. And so one of the things that I've told the companies at the hardware neighborhood is that hardware can be great. I mean, there's nothing like building a physical product and shipping it to someone and having them use it and seeing your product out in the real world. But it is tough. It is a big undertaking. I've worked with some companies that were doing software stuff primarily, and they wanted to build like a hardware kind of widget to kind of like be an accessory to their software. And I've talked some of them out of that, because it's like, I think what you're talking about is great, but unless you have the funds to go pay some company to design that whole thing and manufacture the whole thing for you, you should probably think twice about it, because just building that little widget seems really simple now, but it's a whole, it's a huge effort just getting that done.
Oh, so. I believe it. Do you mind sharing for our audience a little bit about perhaps a factory negotiation that you've had to be involved in?
Well, it's just like you think about we see it. They're a CM, a contract manufacturer. I didn't even know. So I knew that there was factories in China, factories in the U.S., but I never knew that there are different types of CMs that specialize in different things. Like there's some that do medical equipment, there's some that do consumer electronics, there's some that only do high value, low volume products. And then there's other factories that are set up to only do high volume, low margin type things. So it's that was a huge learning experience. So just going in and like figuring out what type of CM makes sense for your product, where you can try to hit the cost targets. Then you've got to like down select and make sure that the CM wants to work with you. So like this is the interesting part, is that you're founding a company, you're building this product, and through your eyes, it's like this product is a slam dunk, right? Like everyone is going to want to build this. Not necessarily true. You go into a CM and they say, okay, this is a cool product. You have to pitch them, right? You pitch them, even though you're going to be paying them, you have to pitch them that they should work with you. And a lot of them have aversions to working with startups now, because I'm sure they've been burned in the past. And then they're asking, okay, what kind of volumes? It's like, well, I want to start by building like few thousand or something like that. And I'm like, well,
that's not enough.
We'd rather start it, come talk to us when you can build like 1 million or 1,000. And so you've got to find the right size CM, and you've got to kind of work your way up, and then the agreement stuff is all after that. You got to negotiate terms and stuff like that. But yeah, that's one very small part of the hardware stuff, but each one of those is like stacks up. It becomes big.
Is there a class of contract manufacturers that'll say yes to anything, despite their quality guarantees, that you kind of had to be wary of? Or
yeah, and I think there's a lot of. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like people say if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of companies out there that will say yes and tell you anything, and then you actually find out like, ooh, actually the company's maybe going under, and they're just trying to get a last ditch effort and
collect a check.
Yeah, and so you got to do due diligence. You have to even for like a CM, like we asked for references. We said, okay, you're pitching us that you're set up to work with startups and you can work with us to ramp us to high volume and stuff like that. Let me talk to someone that you've actually done that with. And if you can't find someone, if they can't point to one person that they've gone through that process with and been successful, then you should be a little wary. Yeah.
And to cope with this problem of negotiating with contract manufacturers who say you don't have enough units, mm-hmm. Are there any organizations or groups of hardware startups that group together to negotiate as a group with contract manufacturers?
I don't think so. And if there is one out there, I'd love to know about it. I mean, I think that would be a fascinating model where you have a group of startups that kind of approach CMs as a group. But it's tough though, because even in that situation where you got 10 startups that each want to do 2,000 units, okay, that now you're talking about a bigger number. Each product is so different, and they have to do so much work just to build the product line out, or the manufacturing line out for each product. And so that's why it's tough, and it's like from the factory's perspective, there's a reason that they want that volume, because they're going to put in a bunch of fixed costs just to get the line up. And then you're telling me we're going to spend 6 months building all this production in this line, this production line, and we're only going to build 100 units, no. So
fair enough. So many of our audience, engineers or non-engineers, lead a pretty chill life, where they go to a day job in an office in the San Francisco Bay Area or other large U.S. city generally. Do you mind painting a picture for people what a day for you might look like?
Well, to give you an idea, today's Saturday. I'm here, so it's great that I'm not in the office right now. I think that as a founder of a company, and even working at a small startup, I'm sure a lot of the people out there know this, but you don't have the luxury of assuming that your work is going to be there tomorrow, right? At a large company, I remember the mentality was always, hey, it's 8 o'clock, it's 7 o'clock, just gonna go home, the work will be here tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And you fortunately, you can be in situations where you don't have to take your work home. You can turn off your email until the next day. You can take the full weekend off. That's really great. And I really do think that if when you're in a part of your career where you're in that, you should really appreciate it. Because not everyone gets to do that. And I look back at my time at Amazon, and I was like, man, I had so much free time, working at Amazon. Because then I worked long hours, but I still didn't bring my home on the work home on the weekends. But at a startup, you don't have that luxury. It's actually, if I don't answer this email to this investor right now, the work might not be there tomorrow. It's those type of things you're dealing with. Everything is very important. Everything is urgent. Everything is very critical. And so you've got to sometimes turn on stuff on the weekends. You've got to stay late. So yeah.
Fair enough. Does your work take you overseas at all to talk with contract manufacturers or otherwise?
Yeah. So I've been that's actually a really fun part of the job. I've been to several different places abroad, Taiwan, places in China. I was recently in Japan, visiting manufacturers and suppliers and factories, but also potential customers as well. Because we're developing our own product. We also have this core technology that I spoke a little bit earlier about, that we're also working with customers to integrate into laptops and working with smartphone manufacturers. So all those guys have a large presence in Asia. So been traveling there quite a bit, and so I think that's been really really great from a learning perspective, just learning, and also Korea. I was in Korea recently, so learning how the business customs work in Japan versus Korea versus China. It's all so different, and so that's been a huge learning experience for me. And I feel very, very fortunate to get that opportunity to travel.
For sure. When you do go on these travels, this might be a personal question. This might not be, I don't know, super relevant. But when you travel to Korea or Taiwan, what does a business trip look like for a hardware developer like yourself?
It depends. So actually we have a few team members that are traveling right now, and a lot of their trips look very different. One person is traveling to deliver some custom sensors we developed to a customer. So he's going to be working with them to in their factory to integrate the sensor and things like that. We've got a couple other team members that are in a different part of Asia that are visiting suppliers, because we have suppliers, a network of suppliers that all provide parts for us. And when you're building a new design, or you're building anything for the first time, you really need someone on the ground there. So they're there supporting the first article inspection of these new supplier parts. And so those two experiences are going to look very different. In one case, you're working, the other person's the customer, or in one case you're the customer, right? And so that's one dynamic, and in the other case you're working with the customer, totally different dynamic. And I've had situations where I've had more low-key trips where I'll have a few meetings, and I'll maybe get some time in the evenings to go see parts of the city I'm in. I've had other trips where I show up at 8 a.m. at the airport, totally jet lagged. I go to meetings all day. I spend the whole week in meetings and then leave, and then I only see the office there that I'm visiting. So it really depends, but yeah. So
Fair enough.
you have really good ones and fun ones, and then sometimes you have really ones that are just like, you're just grinding all week.
We had a guest on where we talked a fair amount about QA and testing, and this is more relevant than ever in hardware engineering, especially where you have statistical benchmarks maybe, or like you have service level agreements with partners who are providing you guys supplies or end products. Can you speak to, for our audience that are not involved in hardware engineering, share a little bit about what QA looks like in hardware engineering?
Yeah. Well, you have like the first level, which is just the specs, right? Like one thing we've learned time and time again is that one of our teammate members used to always say this: garbage in, garbage out. So if you send a spec over to a supplier and you say, here's what I want, and it's garbage, and if it doesn't clearly define everything that you need and clearly communicate everything you're expecting, you won't get what you're expecting. You're going to get the garbage out. So one thing that we've been, it's a transition. When you're a startup, you only have a few people, you only have so much time to put together the spec. But we're going through this process where we're kind of like growing up as a company and getting much better at really knowing what our specs look like for each different component. We know, we have our suppliers we've worked with to ensure they can meet the specs. So that's a big part of it, just the upfront communication. Like, I want you to build this, and it needs to make sure, and I need to go make sure that you know how to build it and you understand what I'm asking for. And then there's the whole part of QAing after the fact. So I need to set up, so if you're the supplier and we already did the spec and you say, okay, I can build it, then I need to go make sure that you're testing correctly, that you're testing the first line of defense, right? Like, don't leave bad parts, don't let bad parts leave your factory. And then I've got to set up tests on my end so that when I receive them, I can test them right away to make sure that they're good parts. So that's again one of these things that's kind of this huge effort that you don't really see. You see a little bit of it when you're working at the big companies. You see there's people on the team that are QA and stuff like that, but you don't see on the supplier end. You just see parts coming into the factory a lot of times, but on the supplier end there might be a whole set of testing, fixtures and things like that someone at your company's developed to ensure that you're getting good parts out. So it's definitely a learning process, and you kind of learn who your suppliers are. Like some of our suppliers, we know, like, okay, the suppliers never shipped us anything bad, and we know that the person in charge is running the show, that they know what they're doing. Others, it's like it's always hit or miss, so we've got to really double down and make sure QA is good and like we're there in the factory. So
the parallels with QA and getting the specification right up front in software engineering are totally direct. Like these parallels are very direct. One of the things that I'm very curious about in running what's an international business is when it comes to writing specifications, is there a language gap? How do you cope with a language gap dealing with contract manufacturers whose first language might not be English?
It happens a lot. I mean, even with our with suppliers and even with some of our customers we're working with, like, it happens a lot where you're not really sure that you're talking about the same thing. A lot of it is just being there. Like that's one of the things that I've been, I was hesitant really early on about, hey, we shouldn't be traveling. We can do everything over video conference. But it's amazing, even over video conference, like you can only get so far. If you have just two engineers in the room, even if they're totally not on the same page language-wise, and you can just have them interact in the same room, and you can whiteboard stuff out, and you can show different things, different concepts you're thinking about, it's just so valuable. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned is that you need someone there. I think we're looking at kind of growing, establishing a team in Asia so that we can have on the ground presence without having to travel there. I think that'll be really, really great. But that's a whole nother challenge that we haven't gotten into yet.
Well, this is a good opportunity to plug something that I'd love to plug, which is whether there are any roles that Sensel is hiring for right now that we can advertise.
Yeah, so I think software engineers, like we're always looking for software people, especially software people that want to work with hardware stuff. Like if you have any interest in working with a hardware peripheral or even doing any firmware development or any kind of factory test procedures or we've got like crazy test robots that are moving around and doing all this stuff. If any of that sounds interesting, like definitely let me know. I'm always looking for software. And then, I think we're going to be growing pretty soon across the board. So any kind of mechanical materials engineers, even, operations. So if you're into hardware and you're interested, just shoot me an email, let me know, and love to chat.
Okay. So far, we've been pretty abstract about exactly what Sensel's product is. We've talked about it being a peripheral to device, whether smartphone or a laptop or what have you. But I figured now would be a good time to do the demo.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good.
I'll bring out my MacBook, and Aaron will bring out Sensel's device.
Just want to show the device here. So this is the Sensel Morph. So this is basically a large tablet-sized touch sensor that features our new technology. So you'll see when I fire up the demo, but our technology basically senses not only where you're touching, but how hard for each contact. So it's almost like a camera for force. Current touch solutions today, if you touch your phone, it only knows where, right? You only get XY coordinates for each finger. But we've got full pressure. We also support any object, so you can interact with like paintbrushes or any kind of interesting materials. So this is our product, the Sensel Morph. The idea is that we have a base sensor. We have an API, so you can get all the data out and things like that. But we also wanted to make the technology available to even non-engineers. You don't have to be a developer to use it. So we developed an ecosystem of basically physical applications. So we've got different interfaces that snap onto the device.
For example, a keyboard?
Yes, this is a QWERTY keyboard with little silicone clicky keys. And it basically, when you put the overlay on, the whole device changes its behavior. So it'll just output events just like a keyboard. And then we've got, I've got a piano one here. You snap it on, and then it's like a full MIDI controller with pressure. We're also implemented MPE, so it's like full pressure sensitivity and things like that. So the basic idea is that we have our touch sensor here. When you plug it in your computer, you can fire up a visualizer, and you can see that we can tell not only where I'm touching, but also how hard. So it's full pressure sensitive, and it's really, you can fit as many points as you want on there. If you see, it's kind of seeing a full force image of my hand. And so, we first developed this product, we took it to hackathons, and we had all sorts of interesting, really cool applications where people were using it as like a drone controller and using the pressure to fly things around, and using really the 3 dimensions of the sensor for controlling things in real life. So we've had art applications, music, even gaming, IoT, like using it as like a gestural smart surface and things like that. And then I mentioned that we also sell a variety of different overlays. So I just have a couple of them with me today. This is a piano. So this is a music application. This is our keyboard QWERTY application. And so the idea is that these are just flexible overlays. So when you put them on our sensor, we can actually sense the touches right through the materials. Because we're sensing force, we can sense through these different flexible overlays. So you can see here it's detecting not only which key I'm hitting, but also how hard. We sense things like we can do pitch bending and modulation and things like that. So it's a very expressive and fun device. And we've made it so that your average consumer that doesn't want to program can just throw this on, and then it becomes a MIDI controller, or you can throw this on and it becomes a keyboard, so you can switch views and just start typing and do whatever you want, hello world kind of thing. And it's got full Bluetooth and battery as well, so it attaches to tablets and iPads and stuff like that.
So that was an awesome demo for one.
Thanks, appreciate it.
One of the topics that I think would be really cool to cover is how, as part of going to market with a hardware business, the final step of getting the products into people's hands. What are the big retail electronics outlets out there today for people who aren't familiar with how people very generally in the market actually buy retail electronics?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Actually, that's another big challenge that's getting into retail, right? So right now we're selling primarily through our site at Sensel.com.
Mm-hmm.
We also are looking at we also have a store through Reverb.com, selling morphs through there. We're also looking at some other experiences. Like there's a really cool startup called Beta. They have like stores that you can get your product in physical, outlets across the country, and people can go try it. So we're looking at kind of plays like that where we can kind of get the device into people's hands without doing the full retail, big box retail like Best Buy and things like that. It's very difficult to get your product in there because one is the margin. They take a big cut of your profit, so you got to make sure the cost structure looks right, and then oftentimes you have to commit a certain amount of inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a financial risk and commitment that you really have to work towards. So yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is all information that I think by and large our audience is not familiar with and is like super illuminating. So.
Yeah.
Are there any questions that you wish I'd asked or that you would like to talk about?
Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Sure, yeah. Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
That's what I think about a lot. I think it's tough. I want to make sure that, because I think one of the things that's challenging is that startups, for whatever reason, have this like kind of it's almost like glamorous when people think, oh, working at a startup in Silicon Valley, and it's like this like kind of like dreamy situation to be doing. And the reality is it's a grind. Like every day is so difficult and so hard. And like I don't want to like sugarcoat that because that's how it is. You're building everything from scratch. But at the same time, while it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, I mean, it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever done in my career for sure. While it's that, it's also one of the best things I've ever done because, I look at the amount that I've learned in 4 years. Like 4 years ago, Aaron knew nothing about how to go raise money or how to hire an employee or how to do any of this stuff that you're doing. And while it's so, tough and it's such a demand because it's not only the time, it's the mental effort, the emotional effort of like being invested in your company. It's a big toll, but you're just learning the entire time. And even when times are hard, you're still learning that whole way. And so I think, would I do it again? I think I'm gonna stay at Sensel and push it. And I really think that we're on a great path to grow an IPO. Post Sensel, whatever that might be, if I decide to, hopefully we IPO and everything is good, and then I can, see what's going on after that. But would I do another startup? Probably not right away. I think I'd love to have some, a break from the startup space for a little while. But I think I would get into it because I think once you get a taste of like seeing all parts of the business, I have a feeling that I'm gonna continue to want that because my day-to-day, people always ask me, what does your day-to-day look like? And I can never give a straight response because it's like, well, this past week I was doing all this HR stuff and setting up all these different things, but this week I'm doing a bunch of engineering and working with customers. Next week I'll be doing something else, and so getting to touch all the parts of the business is just such an interesting and unique experience that I do highly recommend it for people that want to do it. You got to know what you're getting into. You can't do it like halfway. Like I think you got to commit. You got to they say jump off the cliff or whatever, and you got to commit and go all in. But I think once you do, I think it's an amazing experience. And all the team members that we have at Sensel, we're 15 right now, and all those our team members are amazing, and I'm like, it's just so great that this is a team that we've built, and that's something to be really proud of. And I want to work with all those guys and throughout my entire career. It goes beyond just this current company. So that's real, and I really do think that's been been an amazing experience. So
Awesome. Well, we're proud of you.
Thanks.
Dude,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
coming on, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And for people to check out Sensel, do you mind mentioning your guys' website?
Yeah, sensel.com. It's sensel.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.